Okay, we left off Section 2, Human Rights and Collective Rights. Article 5, full effect and observance of human rights. Indigenous people and persons have the right to full enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms as recognized in the Charter of the United Nations, the Charter of the Organization of American States, and international human rights laws. Article 6, collective rights. Indigenous people have collective rights that are indispensable for their existence, well-being, and integral development as people. In this regard, the states recognize and respect the right of the indigenous people to their collective action, to their to their juridical, social, political, and economic systems or institutions, to their own cultures, to profess and practice their spiritual beliefs. See, that's part of spiritual beliefs is part of the culture of the indigenous people. To use their own tongues and languages, and that's your right to do that, and to their lands. And you just saw that it says, the Americans, this is our land. Territories and resources. States shall promote, with the full and effective participation of the indigenous people, the harmonious coexistence of rights and systems of the different population groups and cultures. And for the record, I'm just reading what is provided. I'm not adding my own thoughts into it, other than pertaining to me, but it goes in accordance with what they're saying. Also, we looked up the definition of what an American is, and the indigenous people was the ones that was found here, that they called copper colored. So I'm not making nothing up. Article 7, gender equality. Indigenous women have the right to recognition, protection, and enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms provided for international law, free of all forms of discrimination. 2, states recognize that violence against indigenous people and persons, particularly women, hinders or nullifies the enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. 3, states shall adopt the necessary measures in conjunction with the indigenous people to prevent and eradicate all forms of violence and discrimination, particularly against the indigenous women and children. Article 8, right to belong to the indigenous people. Indigenous persons and communities have the right to belong to one or more indigenous peoples in accordance with the identity, tradition, customs, systems of belonging of each people. To discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such rights. And then yesterday, of course, I claim to be Ibri, and then according to the indigenous people and according to the people of the land, Moor, M-U-U-R, and then here we also see here I don't claim to be black, because that's a color of law term, but I am indigenous. And then here I'll just say the indigenous people, but they said black people. Then they had this. They said a few of them was Washita, Yamasee, Arakus, Cherokee, Choctaw, and of course among others. And of course, based on my heritage before me, I believe I would fall under the Washita, Cherokee people. Let me see, which are Ibri. M-U-U-R, Moor, the original people. I just look at the time. Alright, right to belong to indigenous people. Where I left off was indigenous persons and communities have the right to belong to one or more indigenous peoples. So, because we are those people. So you have the right to belong to more than one of them. Indigenous persons and communities have the right to belong to one or more indigenous peoples in accordance with the identity, traditions, customs, and systems of belonging of each people. No discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such a right. And what I would say, this is just for consideration, because people, the evil ones, are always trying to find a loophole, and they're always trying to find a way. Okay, well, it says that, but what is the language? Well, we would have had our language if you wouldn't have colonized us. So you can't use that. You take a people away from their knowledge base. How can you expect them to know everything about themselves? This is a progression, but the foundation has been already settled that we are the indigenous people. So you can't use that. Let's see. Article 8, juridical, that's what it is, juridical personality. The state shall recognize fully the juridical personality of the indigenous people, respecting indigenous forms of organization and promoting the full exercise of the rights recognized in this declaration. Article 9, rejection of assimilation. Indigenous people have the right to maintain, express, and freely develop their cultural identity in all respects, free from any external attempt at assimilation. 2. The state shall not carry out, adopt, support, or favor any policy to assimilate the indigenous people or to destroy their cultures. Article 10. Protection against genocide. Indigenous people have the right to not be subjected to any form of genocide or attempt to exterminate them. Let me read that again. Article 10. Rejection. Article 11. Protection against genocide. Indigenous people have the right to not be subjected to any form of genocide or attempt to exterminate them. Let me read that again. Article 11. Protection against genocide. Indigenous people have the right to not be subjected to any form of genocide or attempt to exterminate them. Did you get that? Let me read it again. Article 11. Protection against genocide. Indigenous people have the right to not be subjected to any form of genocide or attempt to exterminate them. Article 12. Guarantees against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and other related forms of intolerance. Indigenous people have the right not to be subjected to racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, or other related forms of intolerance. The state shall adopt and preventive and corrective measures necessary for the full and effective protection of this right. Section 3, cultural identity. Article 13, right to cultural identity and integrity. Indigenous people have the right to their own cultural identity and integrity and their cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, including historic and ancestral heritage, and the protection, preservation, maintenance, and development of their cultural heritage for their collective continuity and that of their members, and so as to transmit that heritage to future generations. 2. States shall provide redress through effective mechanisms which may include restitution developed in conjunction with indigenous people with respect to their culture, intellectual, religious, and spiritual property taken without their free, prior, and informed consent or in violation of their laws, traditions, and customs. 3. Indigenous people have the right to recognition and respect for all their ways of life, worldview, spirituality, uses and customs, norms and traditions, forms of social, economic, and political organizations, forms of transmission of knowledge and institutions, practice, beliefs, values, dress, and languages, recognizing their inner relations as elaborated in this declaration. See, that's why I was saying the indigenous people, that's their way. Belief is their way. And I'm not saying following a man doctrine, but as the indigenous people has been so mistreated. This is just me speaking. I'll get back to the document. Indigenous people has been so mistreated over the years, and they're acknowledging that. But their faith in the higher power, Allah, Allah, Yahuwah, whatever you called him. But the traditional indigenous people, I believe, always believed in Yahuwah, Yahweh, So, Allah, in this land, because that's what got them through. That was their inner strength. Singing the old spirituals. I ain't talking about in the church 501c3 sections, but I'm talking about just in reality, the true religion. That religion that got you through the day and through the night to be able to endure. So you can't take away a man's faith and religion, because sometimes that's all they had. That's all the ancestors had to make it through the day and through the night. That's part of the culture. Section 3 was indigenous people have the right to the recognition and respect for all their ways of life, worldviews, spirituality, uses and customs, norms and traditions, forms of social, economic, and political organizations, forms of transmission of knowledge, institutions, practices, beliefs, values, dress, and languages, recognizing their inner relationship with elaborated in this declaration. Their interrelationship as elaborated in this declaration. Article 14. Let me go to the next video.